morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are based. Hello from our streaming studio here in Hamburg. I'm Anna.
And I am Jason.
And it's our great pleasure to be your hosts for these coming 2 hours. Fantastic to see so many of you online joining us for the 2025 edition of METS. Now, I do hope that you know what you're getting yourselves into here, but in case you wonder, maybe some of you will have seen Jason on social media. So then you know we're not talking about baseball, we're not talking about modern art.
We are here to host the DNV's Maritime Energy Transition Summit.
Exactly, ladies and gentlemen. Our goal today is to explore the latest trends, challenges and opportunities related to the maritime energy transition. That is, of course, a massive topic to tackle. We'll try our very best to take you through the program because we've got loads on the agenda and you will get to hear it from some industry leaders, from some top-notch DNV experts, regulatory experts as well, and all innovators in their own right who are all committed to driving this change. And why is that important?
Well, because the maritime energy transition is no longer just an option, it's a necessity. The industry must act swiftly to reduce emissions and adopt sustainable practices. And the decisions we take today will definitely shape the future of our planet, of our oceans and our planet.
Yes, and again, that's a difficult one. If anything, I think what we're setting out today is to try to enable all of you out there to take maybe quicker, but certainly better informed, science-based decisions when thinking about your own companies, your own fleets, decarbonization strategies and way ahead. And in order to do that, we have designed a great program. And let me very quickly take you through some highlights of what you can expect over the coming 2 hours or so. So in a moment, we're going to kick it off with a very short keynote by the CEO of DNV Maritime, Knut Nielsen, will join us to set the scene. And then we're going to dive into some of the drivers behind that push for greener shipping that we see across the industry. We will start by looking at the cargo owner's perspective. I'm very pleased to say that we will be joined by a representative of the Zero Emissions Maritime Buyers Alliance, and we would like to challenge and ask them what is driving the commercial side of the maritime energy transition. And then talking about drivers, of course, we will not get away not talking about regulatory developments. That's a tricky one to squeeze into a short slot, but we will give it a try. Of course, when thinking about regulations and what it means for all of you, no matter what your role is in the industry, the stakes are high. And sometimes on the regulatory side, the mills grind very slowly. Then again, there's loads of discussions happening at IMO, at EU, at national and regional levels. So we'll dive a little bit into that together with our Director Environment, Eirik Nyhus, and he will also host a very interesting conversation with the European Commission. So that's a highly recommended slot that you should definitely listen in closely. And then data is increasingly important. Data is a key enabler for the energy transition, more generally speaking, but very specifically, data is a key enabler for effective emissions management and reporting. So we have a really interesting slot on data and emissions management. We're going to get to hear Hapag-Lloyd's perspective. We have Dorina Schwarz joining us live in the studio later today, and hopefully we will get to hear her perspective on compliance and also on commercial needs and how Hapag-Lloyd is solving that challenge. There's much more on the agenda. We also want to get practical and not only discuss long-term ambitions, but also short-term applications and solutions. We've got a great lineup of DNV experts and leading industry voices tackling the topic from various perspectives.
And once we're done, here on the main stage, there is more to come. We have a series of breakout sessions where you will get the chance to deep dive into DNV's decarbonization services and gain further insights. So stay tuned for that. We have a great lineup, a great program, and no time to waste.
That's right, no time to waste, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get started. We're now going to kick it off with a short keynote, some reflections by the CEO of DNV Maritime on the state of the industry and the pathway ahead. Over to Knut Nielsen, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon wherever you are joining us from. A very warm welcome to this year's edition of the Maritime Energy Transition Summit, or METS, as it is known more widely now. It's fantastic to see such a large audience tuning in for what will be a day full of important insight related to the maritime energy transition. So why METS and what is it all about? As we all know, decarbonization is the biggest topic in shipping today, growing in importance every year. In 2023, the IMO set us all on a course for full decarbonization by or around 2050, with some shorter-term goals along the way. We are now halfway into the 2020s, and the first of these goals, a 20% reduction in emissions compared to 2008 levels by 2030, is already on the horizon, yet without enforcement in place. On the other hand, recent legislation in the EU ETS in 2024 and Fuel EU Maritime as of this year is putting a price on emissions, with similar rules expected to be implemented by the IMO in 2027, if the member states can agree. But the drive for decarbonization is not just coming from the regulatory side. We continue to see a push for greener shipping from cargo owners, financiers, and wider society in segments where the end consumer is more directly connected with the cargo being transported. Typically, car carriers and container vessels. And of course, nothing is ever straightforward. Shipping is and always will be a global industry, which is directly influenced by global events. Attacks in the Red Sea have led to widespread rerouting of vessels around the Cape, driving up ton miles. The recent re-election of Donald Trump to the White House brings fresh uncertainties to global trade, like tariffs and trade conflicts. The situation is volatile, and with so many moving parts, demands on shipping are complex. This can, very understandably, feel overwhelming. Aside from regular day-to-day operations, ship owners are asking themselves tough questions, like what alternative fuel should I adapt my fleet to, and will there be enough supply? What kind of energy efficiency measures should I implement, and how effective can this really be? What role does data play, and how can I integrate this smoothly into my operations? And not least, should I be a first mover, fast follower, or potentially a slow adapter? At DNV, we understand that these are not questions with simple answers. Carbon-neutral versions of fuels like methanol and ammonia look highly promising decarbonization solutions, while LNG, on the other hand, is playing an increasingly important role in the energy transition. However, yard space remains tight and new build costs are high, so investing in new builds or retrofits represent difficult investment decisions for ship owners. Now, this is further complicated by the limited supply and higher costs of these fuels. Nonetheless, great strides are being made, and it is inspiring to see high levels of collaboration, both within shipping and with key stakeholders outside the industry, to drive the production and uptake of these fuels. After another record year of new orders for alternative fueled vessels, it is also encouraging to see ship owners around the world making hard choices and investing in flexibility to burn these alternative fuels. Progress is being made, and I applaud all ship owners who are taking on the role of first movers, inspiring others, showing strong, demand signals to the market, and accelerating industry progress. Now, we can ask ourselves, what about energy efficiency? According to last year's Maritime forecast, the optimal combination of energy efficiency measures can deliver fuel savings up to 16% by 2030. If reached, this can contribute to the bulk of emission reductions necessary to reach that first IMO goal, while also alleviating the pressure on alternative fuels. Energy efficiency comes, as we know, in many shapes and forms. This begins with operational measures like speed and route optimization, exploring innovative technologies, and goes all the way through to reintroducing sails on modern vessels. Energy efficiency makes sense regardless of fuel choice and future price on carbon emissions. Finding the optimal combination of measures and technologies is challenging, though, and the effectiveness of many measures is still to be validated. Energy efficiency done effectively can contribute significantly to decarbonization, while also driving more profitable operations. Underlying all of this is the increasingly important knowledge we can harvest from data. EU ETS and Fuel EU Maritime have been game changers for the way that shipping deals with data. For both, verified emission data is a vital element. Extending beyond compliance, it is also crucial for maintaining operational and commercial integrity across the maritime value chain. Ship owners, managers, and charterers now depend on reliable, standardized data related to emissions compliance. Doing this well instills trust between parties, paving the way for efficient decision-making and smoother commercial operations. These are just some elements. Maritime decarbonization is a wide and intricate tapestry with countless moving parts. And this brings us back to my first question: why METS? We hope that today's insights will help you tie all these elements together and come a step closer to a decarbonization strategy that works best for you and for your fleet. These are unprecedented times for shipping. As we continue to push forward with our decarbonization efforts, it is important to acknowledge that progress may not always come in straight lines. There are numerous challenges that can slow down the pace of decarbonization, including technological immaturity, regulatory hurdles, geopolitical events, and, not least, economic constraints. However, it is crucial that we never lose sight of our goals and keep moving. In a way, it's like riding a bicycle. To keep balance, we must keep moving. Time is of the essence, and delaying is not an option. We must remain committed to our vision of a sustainable and carbon-neutral maritime industry. By working together, sharing knowledge, and supporting innovation, we can overcome these obstacles and continue to make meaningful strides towards a greener future. Finally, let us remember the importance of taking on this challenge in a way that prioritizes the safety of our seafarers, vessels, and the environment. By fostering a culture of safety, we not only protect lives and assets, but also enhance the overall resilience and sustainability of our operations. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the day. And with this, I want to hand it back to you, Anna and Jason, in the studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Knud. What a great way to set the scene and help us get started with our program today. And also loads of important points made there in his speech, not least stressing that the push for greener shipping is not only coming from the regulatory side, but we do, of course, see this push also coming from the cargo owners, from financiers, insurance companies, and not least greater society. So it's many, many different drivers here. And we would like to zoom in now on the cargo owner's perspective and just try to understand a little bit what's driving the commercial side of the story. And I believe, Jason, you have a guest with you now who will for sure have a view. Over to you.
Thank you, Anne. So decarbonization targets are set and regulations will become more stringent, as Eric will touch upon in the next session. But last year, it was a milestone year for the shipping industry because it was the first time that we saw a monetary incentive kicking in through the ETS. And this year, we see FuelEU kicking in. So both focus on usage of fuel on board, but they are not the biggest incentives yet. Still, they have set the wheels in motion. At the same time, we see cargo owners and charterers, they focus more and more on their ESG performance. And all this lead the industry to adopting alternative and low carbon fuels quite fast. But still, we have a long way to go until we have the full energy transition of the industry. There are many challenges to overcome, and one of them is the fuel supply versus demand conundrum, which is not so easy to break. Various stakeholders of the industry are working towards breaking this conundrum, and on the leading front is an organization called ZEMBA that stands for Zero Emissions Maritime Buyers Alliance, who set to accelerate the adoption of sustainable, scalable, and economically viable solutions for the shipping industry. So I'm quite happy and thrilled to have the chance to talk to the CEO and President of ZEMBA, Mrs. Ingrid Irigoyen. Welcome, Ingrid, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So I would like to start with a general question. What is the vision and purpose of ZEMBA? Why does the world and the maritime industry need an alliance for the fuel transition?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So our vision at ZEMBA is a maritime sector that is powered by clean energy that allows global trade to thrive in the clean energy economy of the hopefully very near future. And our purpose in catalyzing that transition is to essentially shepherd a large group of freight buyers through collective forward procurements that result in multi-year demand commitments for clean new fuels and technologies. By making these multi-year commitments of demand, we give carriers, fuel producers, ports, investors, and everyone else in the value chain who needs to take the leap into these new fuels and technologies, we give them confidence to help grow a competitive market. This creates access for our members to those new solutions that otherwise might not even be available to them. It helps create those new markets, and it also gives our members and the rest of the value chain the potential to start to harness economies of scale right from the start of this transition.
Not so easy tasks ahead of you. And we see different approaches in different segments and ship types. But would you like to share with us, from your standpoint, what is driving the cargo owners to work towards decarbonization?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Of course, many of them want to live up to public commitments that they've made to be good stewards of this planet while they're also being profitable businesses, commitments that they've made to people, to human communities, and wanting to be part of this clean energy future in a way that is constructive and positive, and that I think consumers reward. But it's also smart business in a much more concrete way. If you're a company who views the economy of the future as one that is powered by clean energy, then a slow transition, a disruptive transition is not what you want. What you want is to enable the transition to be smooth, to enable it to be fast, so that we can achieve scale and get to those economies of scale as quickly as possible. And finally, speaking of scale, the other thing that cargo owners want to ensure is that the right solutions become available in the market as quickly as possible, because with scale comes economic viability. So they want to ensure that we don't get stuck on transition fuels or bridge fuels that cannot achieve the significant life cycle emissions reduction that they're looking for, or those fuels that have an obvious ceiling for scalability because of limited feedstocks. So if we can get the cleanest, most scalable solutions into the market and supported strongly soon, then freight buyers will realize the cost savings of those economies of scale sooner. So it's a very practical mission, but it also, of course, has the bigger picture vision of being responsible stewards of our planet's resources.
And I think we have seen this fast adoption and scalability in the container ship segment, which is also where you focus. Do you think, do you have discussions with other segments as well? Are there key learnings that we can transfer to other commodities as well?
Absolutely. So, of course, we've started in the container segment for what may be obvious reasons. The public-facing companies that have made the most bold commitments related to the clean energy transition, they tend to be public-facing and they tend to use the container segment primarily. So we've started there. But we also have a lot of expressions of interest coming in constantly from ship owners and operators in other segments, from cargo owners in other segments. And so we see a lot of opportunity to expand the project into those other segments. Doing this work is complex already, and so we try to keep only a few variables in motion every time we refine our process. But as we look to the third round, right now we're in our second round procurement, as we look ahead to the next round, we're very keenly interested in expanding into other segments like bulk, potentially tankers, potentially ro-ro, and we'll need to do some serious design work, and we'll need those segments of shipping to provide some input to us. So for those of you who are interested in potentially engaging in that third round, a multi-segment procurement, we'll be keen to hear from those leaders in the industry to see how this could work for them, because the whole point is to help build the business case. So if we can help build the business case for the transition in other segments as well, then we need to do that in a way that is collaborative, and of course we'll meet those needs. But that is certainly our vision.
Great. And since you mentioned the design and your processes, would you like to share how do you assess the decarbonization effort? Does how the fuel or technology matter for you?
So we try to be as fuel and technology neutral as possible, just as a philosophical position to take. You know, we want to set goals and standards and then allow the market and allow technology innovation to thrive and tell us what the best solutions are. And so for our first two tenders, that's exactly what we've done. Except that in our second tender, we've actually narrowed those fuel solutions down to e-fuels specifically. And that's because we see a lot of potential in that category of fuels to become scalable in the long run and really help us achieve our various environmental and societal goals. So a lot of positive perceptions of the category of e-fuels, but also not being specific about which e-fuels it is that we want to advance. We're also very open to other technologies, whether those be battery. We love the idea of wind assist and wind propulsion, wherever that's sort of commercially feasible. And so really trying to be as open as we can to embrace new technologies, provided that they meet our criteria. And those are related to a significant emissions reduction, getting as close to zero as we can. And also, of course, those scalability, because this is a long-term strategy. This is not just about getting decarbonization credits tomorrow. This is about really setting the industry on a path toward really achieving its goals in 2040 and 2050, and that requires a whole new collection of fuels and technologies to be successful in the market.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, when we talk about bio or electrofuels, it's a matter of the infrastructure that is there and where can you buy, where can you burn the fuel. And There are some schemes in the industry, the so-called biofuel insetting schemes, book and claim, that seem to be promising. Would you like to share your thoughts on those?
Absolutely. So we are big supporters of the book and claim approach, and in fact is something that we use for all of our tenders. And the reason that we think that's so important is that for sectors like shipping, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to align the interests of any specific cargo owner in terms of where they need to ship their goods, when they need to ship their goods, with which carriers they're working to actually move their physical freight. To align all of that, not only across a group of cargo owners in order to close the cost gap for the vessel operator, but also to align that with where fuels may be available, which carriers may be willing to deploy those fuels, which carriers have which vessels. So aligning all of that in reality, in space and time, in the beginning of the transition is virtually impossible. So what we appreciate about book and claim approaches is that they not only allow you the flexibility to decouple that demand from that in terms of the willingness to pay. It allows us to support those fuels, those carriers who are willing to deploy those fuels wherever they need to operate them, whenever they need to operate them, on whatever kind of vessel it is that's available to them, and allow cargo owners from all over the world to essentially pool their demand and channel it into those best offerings. So it's a way of accelerating the transition, and it's really skipping over this mismatch of space and time that otherwise we would see. Of course, we've seen a lot of offerings from carriers already, sort of their proprietary green offerings that we call that as a mass balance approach within their own network. All book and claim does is further decouple while also actually creating more transparency and more traceability for our cargo owners, who then feel more confident in being able to claim those emissions reductions and claim the progress that they have helped make in speeding up this transition. So for us, it's a real win-win-win. Of course, those approaches need to be the highest quality, follow best practices. Provided they do that, we are very enthusiastic about book and claim as an accelerator of this transition and a way to really create new business opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely can help with faster adoption. Of course, there is a need for quite wide auditing and verification scheme behind it. At this point, I would like to point out that one of our breakout sessions will focus on biofuel insetting. And so after the main stage, whoever is interested can deep dive into that. So a final question for you, Ingrid. So far, we see a lot of voluntary schemes being the drivers for emissions management and focus on emissions. How much impact do you think those voluntary schemes can have, and how do you see them working complementary with the regulatory framework that is becoming more and more stringent?
Yeah, great question, and one that I often get, and is a really important question. So I think we have a few perspectives. One is that voluntary corporate action is tremendously important for sending the right signals and getting new solutions supported in the market as a start. But it's really a start. And if you think about the many, many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of companies around the world that use maritime transport, we can't expect even a majority of those to be willing to pay a premium. So it's really the leaders that are doing this, and they are doing this voluntarily. They are technically savvy. They are future-oriented companies. They're looking not just at next year and the year after that, but decades ahead. They plan to be in business, and they plan to thrive in a clean energy economy. But not all companies are able to do that. They don't have the cash on hand to be able to have that kind of flexibility. So policy is absolutely essential for bringing these solutions to vast scale, for creating an even playing field. And our hope is that the voluntary corporate action by those visionary leader companies will give policymakers some insights, right? We can provide them with lessons learned as we run these procurements, and also give them some inspiration that the corporate leaders of the world really do see this as the future. They want this to be the future, and they want to see that even playing field for the clean new fuels and technologies. And they see a real business opportunity as well. So, being that inspiration, providing some test cases for the use of these fuels, I think is an important contribution we can make to the policy space. But of course, strong policy support is always important when society is going through a positive improvement that will have a lot of benefits, not just for creating new markets and new businesses, but also for things like human health and well-being. So I would say we certainly need a lot of both. But I have never said and will never say that Zemba can do it all. This really is a leadership initiative that is intended to help set us on the right course. And then it is the public sector in collaboration with the private sector that will need to take us all the way to our destination.
Yeah, that's a very positive and practical position. So Ingrid, we can talk many hours on that topic, but unfortunately we have run out of time. At this point, I would like to sincerely thank you for joining and for sharing your insights with us.
Absolutely my pleasure, and I wish you an excellent rest of your meeting.
Thank you. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Jason, and a big thank you also from my side to Ingrid. I think that was a very interesting conversation to listen into, and I think the last point there that the hope for policy support is maybe a nice segue into our next topic. I promised you we're going to talk about the other key driver that we see behind the push for greener shipping, and of course that is regulations. Jason just pointed out regulations are becoming ever more stringent, and also Knut mentioned in his opening keynote that while things are moving, we do see progress in the industry, but then again also we do see some challenges that may actually slow down the pace of decarbonization. He mentioned regulatory hurdles as being possibly one of those elements. So now let's talk regulations, and yes, that is a complex topic, if not a beast, to try and get our head around. There's so much going on at IMO level, at regional levels, at national levels. Obviously, the EU has emerged as a driving force, if you like, with the introduction of Fuel EU and EU ETS. So it's a lot of things to be on top of, and we'll give it our very best to try and demystify a little bit for you what's going on now and what's next on the regulatory agenda. And I am extremely happy, ladies and gentlemen, that I now am joined by a great colleague here in the studio. With me is Eirik Nyhus, who is our Director Environment. And if you're known for one thing, it is to explain regulations in a nutshell and with a smile. A warm welcome, Eirik.
Thank you, Anna.
Great to have you with us here today. Before you will actually give us a brief overview about what's happening right now on the regulatory agenda, maybe if I may, two very quick personal questions to you. A, how on earth are you managing to keep on top of it all? And if I may, second quick question, would you agree that the pace of change has also accelerated on the regulatory side, maybe against public perception?
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. I think there is a slight distinction between decarbonization itself and what's happening on the regulatory space. And the regulatory space, the pace has really picked up the last couple of years. And we are seeing things happening through this decade, essentially. When it comes to keeping on top of stuff, all I can say is that you got to have enough caffeine and you're good to go.
Yeah, okay, so I'll make sure he gets his caffeine shot right after his presentation. But I'll hand over to you now, Eirik. Before we get started, though, if you have questions for Eirik, please make use of the chat function on the right-hand side of your streaming window. So if you type away and insert your questions or comments, please do throughout his presentation and the conversation that he's going to host in a minute. And then I'll try to bring some of those questions here onto the main stage to discuss later on. Yeah, so over to Eirik.
Oh, thank you for that. We have an interesting conversation coming up in a minute or two. But before that, I really just want to set the scene for what's happening in the regulatory landscape when it comes to the maritime energy transition. the challenges we're facing and what's going on over the next, immediate future, essentially. Well, first of all, on the international stage, we have what's happening at the IMO, obviously. Because at the IMO, we are on the cusp of adopting a set of international greenhouse gas regulations that, once they go through, are going to be very significant in creating those drivers for the uptake of alternative fuels that we are looking for here. We only have to sort out some extremely thorny political questions, as well as fix a lot of technical design features and get them so sorted. And we have to do that by end of MPC 83, which is just before Easter. So, no pressure on those of us who actually are participating at the IMO meetings. It's doable, but it's going to take a little while. The second bit is what's happening in the EU, of course. There we have the ETS last year, as mentioned, and we have the Fuel EU Maritime this year, and we still have clarifications coming in. We will have the potential of amendments in the not too distant future, pending some reviews we'll be touching on. So lots of things happening with the EU as well. Finally, as an example of national initiatives, we have the UK. This is your kind of post-Brexit bonus, if you will, where the UK is looking at setting up its own emission trading system from 1st of January 2026. Design features are still not finalized, but we are waiting for conclusions in the not too distant future. So all in all, a pretty intense few years ahead of us, which is why I was extremely thrilled to be able to pre-record a conversation with with Foutini Ioannidou of the Waterborne in DG Move, part of the European Commission, where we explore some of the perspectives as seen from the European Union. Before we transition to that, though, I do want to again emphasize what Anna just said. Type your questions into the chat. We will have a discussion after the conversation. We'll try to get to as many as possible of those questions then, and we'll try to deal with the rest in the chat as we move along. Today, we're lucky to have with us Foutini Ioannidou, Director of Waterborne at DG Move. She and her team are central to the European Commission's work on decarbonization of the maritime sector and have, of course, been instrumental to the work on MRV, ETS, and Fuel EU Maritime. Foutini, welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. That's a very important event for us, and I understand there will be many, many people following it. So.
We certainly hope so. Thank you very much again. As I was mentioning in the previous segment, we are living in complex times. We have maritime and greenhouse gas regulations being developed and were already rolled out nationally, regionally, and internationally. Now, do you see the EU's ETS and Fuel EU maritime regulations evolving further beyond the plans we already know? And are there other potential EU initiatives on the table? I was thinking specifically maybe evolution of the ETD, the taxation directive, and elements like that?
Well, thank you for the question. Clearly, when it comes to EU ETS and Fuel EU Maritime, our real focus for the coming years will be to effectively implement these two regulations. They are complex. They are some kind of first in its kind for the sector. So our focus will be really the effective implementation. We will continue to work with industry, to support industry verifiers, but of course also national authorities in their efforts to comply with these regulations. And we will listen, as we are already doing, to their practical concerns and experiences regarding implementation. You know that both legislations foresee that the Commission will prepare a comprehensive report by 26 for ETS, 27 for Fuel EU. We are going to look at all relevant issues, taking into account what we have seen during the first years of implementation. We are going to look at their effectiveness, their environmental integrity, questions of administrative burden, their impacts on competitiveness, and this will be also the opportunity to develop proposals for concrete amendments to improve these regulations if needed. There are further measures that will be also coming up. Clearly, we have the IMO that is going to deliver, hopefully, an agreement by April this year. And in this context, we will also carry out the assessment of the complementarity with the global measures that IMO will have decided this year. And then we need as well to take them into account in case of amendment of this legislation. Further measures beyond regulations, but I can detail them further down as we discuss, is the support in terms of developing clean technologies and the production of clean fuels at scale and affordable prices. And there as well, we have, in particular, an initiative coming out this year called the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. But also we have other initiatives that are going to look at these questions of technologies, the EU Maritime Industrial Strategy and the EU Port Strategy.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mention that because, of course, with the new commission, there's been a renewed focus on competitiveness and an associated discussion on the regulatory burden, as you know, as demonstrated, of course, through that recent publication of the Competitiveness Compass. And that, I guess, also links to that transportation work you mentioned. But in the Compass, the Commission states its intent to reduce reporting obligations for businesses by 25% and by 35% for SMEs. Do you see this having any implications for maritime and that those fairly complex reporting obligations that we're seeing under MRV, ETS, and FuelEU Maritime? I heard you mention that this will be part of reviews in 26-27, but do you think does this change the picture for these regulations on top of what already has been talked about in the media?
Indeed, in fact, the effort to reduce reporting obligations, in particular for SMEs, is really one of the priorities of this Commission's mandate. When we are looking at ETS and FuelEU, first of all, let's remind ourselves that they apply to ships above a certain size threshold, meaning that most SMEs within the maritime sector are not directly affected. I'm saying most. I'm not saying that it doesn't apply to SMEs. Looking at what we have done so far, when we were designing and also during the interinstitutional negotiation process, we have tried to streamline reporting requirements so as to minimize inconsistencies and obligations between MRV, ETS, and FuelEU to avoid decreasing complexity and cost. And in fact, we have continued these efforts through the development of secondary legislations, for example, to allow operators to use the same data while compiling the respective monitoring plans or reports for these regulations. Nevertheless, we acknowledge that further improvements are possible. For example, we have the definition of responsible entity that is different between ETS and fuel regulations. So it is clear, speaking to the on the question of responsible entity, that we need to determine what is the most effective approach, taking it also into consideration what IMO is going to deliver. And we will certainly, for this particular aspect and possibly other aspects, we will need to take a consistent view between the two legislations. As I said, we are going to tackle this and other issues during the scheduled evaluations of ETS and FuelEU. And our aim really is to achieve our objectives in the simplest and least better in some way. So we have some way to go.
We'll try to have a bit of patience as well. So thank you for those comments. Since you're mentioning IMO, I think we can segue into MEPC 83 coming up now with a key intersessional negotiating session. Well, just around the corner, followed of course by MEPC 83 itself just before Easter. Now, I'm asking you maybe to look a bit into a crystal ball, and the simple question is, will we have an agreement on both technical and economic measures? And second part of it, what do you expect that to look like? It's a difficult one, I know, but I'm asking.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, you are asking me to look at the crystal ball. And it's not an easy reply. Indeed, we are very close to the finish line with MEPC 83 in a few months. We have an important intersessional meeting in less than 2 weeks. From our perspective as EU, it is very important that we stick to the timeline agreed, that we will have an agreement on the basket of measures in April this year. And this is important because this will give the right signal to industry to invest in zero and near zero fuels. And that will allow us to have the energy transition as soon as possible and minimize the cost of this transition. On our side, together with EU member states, we have been engaging intensively in intersessional work. Maybe you have heard that we have submitted recently, together with another, in total, we have 51 IMO delegations, including our, of course, 27 member states, and very, very big flag states. We have submitted a common proposal with variations on a greenhouse gas contribution levy as a component of the basket of measures. And clearly there is much work ahead of us. Time is really not much, but we remain confident that through continued cooperation amongst all IMO delegations, that we will have an agreement for a full package consisting both of a technical measure, a GHG fuel standard, and an economic measure by April this year. On our side, we will act constructively. It's important that IMO delivers this April, and in fact, they will have our full support. But we are really committed that this finally agreed basket of measures must deliver on all the goals of the revised GHG strategy that IMO has adopted.
I've read the proposal along with the rest, and I agree with you. There is a lot of work remaining ahead of us here to try to bridge the differences, and very little time. But fingers crossed. Now, just let's see. We're past the crystal ball perspective, and we have an agreement. We have an IMO agreement on international regulations, constructed to achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions similar to what the EU regulations are constructed to achieve, or maybe even more. Let's just take that as a given. We get to that point. You already mentioned the review efforts on the ETS and the few EU maritime and obligations there. In those review efforts, is alignment, sunsetting, are they even options from a realistic perspective? Or did you see those as any revisions leading to more tweaking rather than a potential sunsetting of those?
Yes, again, that's another difficult question, if I may say so. As I said already, both legislations include provisions that require us to assess in a report the complementarity with global measures adopted at IMO. And this report will be accompanied or may be accompanied by legislative proposals to amend ETS and Fuel EU. This will be a very important discussion because we would like to create alignment between EU and IMO measures to the extent possible. But it's very difficult to say. At this stage, we will have first to scrutinize the level of ambition, the scope, the enforceability, the integrity of the measures adopted by IMO before we can switch. So it's difficult to reply to your question. Again, for us, priority is now to have a sound and ambitious framework which will allow us to do after the adoption by IMO this work of alignment.
That's fair enough. I had to try though, but I hope you understand that. Okay, moving to our last question here. At the end of the day, the efforts to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency will of course matter and all that, but it does boil down to transitioning to other fuels, in essence creating a demand for alternatives. As of now, as we know, the available volumes of alternative fuels, they're not really even close to what we need and what we will be needing. So beyond regulatory efforts, can you say a little bit about what you in the EU are doing to encourage the very significant supply side increase on alternative fuels? Because this is really the crux of the transition from the industrial perspective, at least.
Yeah, and we fully agree with your analysis. Indeed, that's a crucial question, and we are doing already a number of things. I would like to mention our work in the context of the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuels Alliance. This is an industrial alliance that facilitates collaboration among key stakeholders, from financial institutions, manufacturers, member states, authorities, to accelerate the adoption of sustainable fuels. Coming out still this year, of course, you know that we have the Clean Industrial Deal. And in this context, we are going to present, I mentioned it very briefly, a sustainable transport investment plan, probably around summer or after the summer, that will provide an industrial strategy framework with roadmaps tailored for each mode of transport and fuel type. And it will discuss how we can expand EU funding mechanisms in order to make sure that the price gap between renewable and fossil fuels is closed, and also how production can be scaled up. And maritime fuels will be one of the main focus areas of this plan.
Thank you for that. And now I would have liked to hold you longer, but I do know that you have a very hectic life, so I will let you go with these questions. So in essence, there you have it, the key perspectives as seen from Brussels. I would like to thank you very much, Foutini, for taking the time to share your insights. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I hope that we'll have the opportunity to speak again very soon.
Of course, and thank you very much for the invitation again.
Thank you once again to Foutini. I think that was a very, very interesting conversation. Thank you, and well done, Eirik. Very insightful indeed. And thank you also for squeezing in a few difficult questions.
We tried.
And talking about difficult questions, we promised the audience that we will try and bring some of your questions from the chat here into the conversation. So let's see how difficult they are for you. So I picked three. Let's start with this one, Eirik. Can you shed some light on what IMO is thinking about revising or replacing the present CII regime?
Yeah. Now the CII, the Carbon Intensity Indicator, has been around for a while, and it's part of the legislation. It's up for review in 2025. Conclusions, of course, not determined yet. I have to disappoint the audience a little bit, I'm afraid, because what's been going on here is that the review has been going on in an IMO correspondence group. That correspondence group has concluded with its draft report that's now gone to MEPC 83 for formal endorsement one way or the other, but the conclusions are very likely to be standing. And of all the identified issues with the CII, most of them have actually been pushed into the future to be dealt with at some point post-2025. We will have reduction rates decided at MEPC 83 from the period 27 to 30, and we will have a more esoteric one regarding data access for recognized organizations such as DNV. But for those who are holding out hopes that now we would fix some of the flaws in the metric or in the system, you have to hold your breath a while longer, I'm afraid.
Okay, we need to hold our breath. Let's do that for a moment and use that time to focus on the next question. MEPC 83 obviously is coming up soon, and a related question at MEPC 83: is DNV going to support a global levy? I guess we need to clarify a little bit our role.
Yeah, DNV is not as such formally represented at MEPC. What we do at MEPC is function as technical advisors to member states, typically Norway and Germany, and we are of course a member of IAX, who also has a representation there. So in that sense, we support the work in those delegations. So DNV is not asked for its view by the IMO Secretariat or the member states, I'm afraid.
That's fair. Thank you for that response. And then final question here on the stage, and then the rest you will tackle in the chat. There is a question on the IMO GFS. Do you expect the IMO GFS to be enforced, or when do you expect it to be enforced?
Yeah, this is really about the regulation I was talking about entering into force in 2027. It's called the GFS by some, GFI by others. We might have a compromise decision calling it the GFIS if we are lucky. But the point is that according to the timeline that Foutini also pointed to, this should enter into force in 2027. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the entry into force date is the effective date, because for technical reasons, it might make more sense to have this becoming applicable from 1st of January 2028, for instance. We're a good solution in our minds. But we have people arguing for 1st of January 2027, and also some saying 1st of January 2029. This is all part of the negotiations we need to sort out at MEPC 83 in April this year.
Right, thank you. And just for dummies like me, GFS stands for Global Fuel Standard, or
Greenhouse Gas Fuel Standard,
Greenhouse Gas
or Greenhouse
Fuel
Gas Fuel Intensity.
There you go. Thank you for that clarification. That was very helpful. Excellent. Thanks, Eirik. You will now spend time online to answer the rest of the questions. And we will now get to segue from environmental regulations to emissions management. Because, ladies and gentlemen, in order to comply with environmental regulations, of course, effective emissions management and emissions reporting is absolutely crucial. Then again, compliance is one thing, and managing the commercial needs is a completely different story. I'm pleased to now hand over to my wonderful colleague, Line Dahl, who will share a few insights on that very topic. And then Line will give us a brief intro and then has the chance to talk to Dorina Schwarz from Hapag-Lloyd, who will talk a little bit about Hapag-Lloyd's perspective, and they will get to discuss related drivers' concerns and also operational implications. So without further ado, over to Line.
Hello, everyone. First, let me say thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend time with me today. I know how busy your schedules are, so it truly means a lot that you're here. This session is about reframing emissions from just a compliance cost to a strategic advantage. When was the last time you took a look at a regulatory requirement and thought, how can I not just comply, but turn this into a business advantage? That's exactly what we are exploring today. Emissions management isn't just about compliance anymore. It's about unlocking real commercial value. So I'll start a bit with the big picture and talk a bit about how a single reliable source of emissions data can transform your operations. And then I'm thrilled to welcome Dorina Schwarz from Hapag-Lloyd to discuss how collaboration and data are shaping the future of their emissions management. So, let's dive in. Building on Eirik Nyhus's excellent points earlier, let's state the obvious. In recent years, shipping has faced a wave of new emissions regulation. It's been a real challenge, and it has pushed us all to rethink how we are operating. Then came 2024, the game changer. With taxes now tied to emissions data in the EU, the demand for accuracy and transparency on the emissions data across the value chain skyrocketed. And it's no longer enough to check in with this data once per year. We now need continuous oversight, ongoing adjustments, and regular settlements. It's a must. And this isn't just about compliance anymore. It's about thriving in a world where every ton of emissions has a price tag. With these challenges, the industry needs an emissions data ecosystem to enable seamless verified data to be exchanged from source to any use case. And we need cross-value chain collaboration. But true collaboration only works if we manage to speak the same language. And in emissions reporting, this didn't exist. Different systems and stakeholders all spoke different dialects. This is why we, over the last 10 years, have been developing the Operational Data Standard, the OVD, which brings clarity, consistency, and interoperability to emissions data. And it's not theory. It's happening in practice. Thanks to our large data partner network, over 50,000 vessels worldwide now speak this same OVD language. So, a quick recap. The game has changed. Emissions now have a direct financial impact and require continuous oversight. Number 2, the industry needs an emissions data ecosystem. And number 3, a large part of the global fleet already have the ability to speak the same language. And so now 2025 and FuelEU Maritime regulation is upon us. This regulation, amongst other things, introduces cross-fleet collaboration as an option for compliance. The regulation as a whole opens up new business risks, but also business opportunities. But opportunities that are only really available for those that have good control over their operational data. So where does DNV fit into this landscape? We have always been a trusted partner, but trust alone is no longer enough. The industry needs trust and connectivity. Without seamless data connectivity, emissions data is fragmented, inaccessible, and underutilized. With our data partner network, we can connect to emissions data from the global fleet and link it to the statutory services and link it to continuous verification at operational level via Emissions Connect, all the while making this quality-assured data available back to our customers so they can safely and easily connect it to their other use cases. In short, working smarter, not harder, with the data. And because many of our customers also rely on other providers, we created the Veracity Solution Partner Program, which enables seamless integration of the verified data into other tools as well. So to round up, emissions management has shifted from a compliance cost to a commercial advantage. And the regulatory demands are now outpaced by the commercial requirements, making granular, verified data essential to staying competitive and fulfilling obligations. So let's get a bit further into it, with Dorina from Hapag-Lloyd joining us here to talk a little bit about how they are tackling this challenge. Welcome so much, Dorina. Could you share with us a bit how you have been approaching the handling of emissions data and the emissions management, and what were your main drivers and concerns?
Thank you so much, Line. It's great to be here. So from our perspective, as an operator in the industry that has different responsibilities, let's say, towards that data handling, we also have different data requirements. We have vessels that we own and that we manage ourselves, for which we really have to be on top of the data to the minute to take care of all the issues beforehand, especially when we look at the time frames we have for verification at the end of the year becoming shorter and shorter. We really have to stay on top of this. Then we have owned vessels that we give to third-party managers where we are still the owner, still in some way responsible. So we have some due diligence here to fulfill, to stay on top of their data as well. And then, of course, we also have chartered vessels. where we also have an economic perspective to make sure that the data reporting is correct, that we receive the data beforehand during the year already in order to make sure that our strategy in terms of treasury, of buying EUAs is working out. So all of this has to be correct, and for this we need reliable data, but also data which stays flexible enough for our data analytics requirements.
Very good. And what are the expectations you get from your customers and stakeholders towards this emission reporting?
Yeah, first of all, the stakeholders in-house have several requirements towards us to have this data available in good quality, in the format they need, to the minute pretty much. And then we also want to, of course, live up to the expectations that customers rightfully have towards Hapag-Lloyd to report correctly. And in both cases, we look at very high expectations, and even an error margin of 1% would not be enough here. So we look at 0 point something to be as exact as we can be for this data.
Both for settlements, I guess, but also for the strategic looking into the future of the operation.
Exactly.
So as you point out, you're operating a large fleet of vessels with different roles, and I'm assuming that having transparency across all vessels and aggregate to fleet level can be quite a challenge. So how are you ensuring consistency in practice?
I think the first step here is that we as an industry across all stakeholders have to understand and align on the fact that data sharing will become more and more necessary. And I think as an industry, we are not really there yet. Nevertheless, we already achieved a good level of data sharing with many. Not forgetting to mention that this is also, of course, happening in your tool, in Emissions Connect. We had a first mover here with C-SPAN, and we can share data really down to the leg level. And this enables us to quite quickly check on the errors. So it's not only making sure the data is correct, it's also how fast you can do this and how much manpower you need for this. So as any step that the software can take over for this is helpful. Yeah. And when we check on the data from the source of an external party and ourselves, we also have the advantage that we can improve the data quality on both sides.
Yeah.
Because errors can come from so many sources.
Yeah.
Having interfaces, having new regulations coming in and new interpretation of that. So as much as we can compare data and dive into the source of an error, as much we can also influence the data quality in the end.
Fantastic. Both reduced effort in collaboration and increased accuracy.
In the best case, yes.
Very good. So what would you say have been the main influencing factor on your data quality?
I think the basis is to develop a common understanding about the data requirements in the first place and what it means exactly. And the game changer here is really whether you work together with different parties and share your learnings and share the mistakes you find. Or whether you don't do this.
So looking a bit into the future, what is your vision for the future, and where do you aim to advance your emissions management capabilities to, and which future needs do you foresee come on the agenda?
Well, I think, first of all, we have built the foundation that we need now to tackle the challenges that keep rising, I would say. And this enables us to implement the necessary solutions to mitigate risks that also come with these rising regulations, and also increase our competitive advantage that you also already refer to as it's the price tag on this now. And in the long run, I think we will need more detailed and automated data sharing also across the industry to the last party, not yet using this maybe. And I think we are quite far from all parties really using the same systems, the same languages here. So we need to be able to combine data sources wherever they come from. And we can only achieve this together, I think. And I'm very confident that Hapag-Lloyd can remain a first mover here in terms of realizing what the impact of these regulations really is, and adjusting and fine-tuning our processes accordingly.
Thank you very much for sharing such good insights and observations, and for joining us here today, Dorina. And now back to Anne and Jason.
Thank you so very much indeed to both Lena and Irina. I think that was a very interesting conversation and extremely insightful to hear what Hapag-Lloyd is doing, and great to see one of those first movers that are urgently needed in the industry to help us push things into the right direction. So really, really interesting. Jason, you've been listening closely, and of course you are engaging in similar conversation with customers around the globe on, I would think, a daily basis. So maybe what's your verdict? Are all ship owners out there equally on top of this?
Well, I would say it's a mixed setting. We see some owners are quite advanced, they have automation, they transmit data to all stakeholders. Others rely more on traditional reporting, more manual work. And as Dorina said, we need to make this transition for the whole fleet. I would take one step back and take the key learning that we had from the previous transition that took place in 2018. It was the year that MRV kicked in. Back then, vast majority of the fleet was reporting very old, in an old-fashioned way. And due to MRV, there was a big transition to more advanced reporting systems. Now I expect, with all this increase of complexity in the regulation and more stakeholders wanting access on the data, I expect to have maybe even bigger transition to more advanced reporting systems.
Thanks for that. So emissions reporting, extremely important topic, and we will see, let's say, kind of a further push in the industry moving forward. There's no way around that. Now, maybe talking decarbonization challenges more broadly, more holistically, of course, also something that you're discussing frequently with many players across the industry. What would you say if you're forced to name the top 3 challenges on top of a ship owner's mind these days? What would it be?
That's a challenging one. Definitely fuel selection and future-proofing the vessels and the investments, data standardization, and maybe a more practical approach on how do I improve today? What actions can I take today in the short term to actually see the impact?
Right. So it's not only about having this long-term strategy and that long-term master plan that will get us to net zero by 2050, but it's really also about practical application right now.
Absolutely. Exactly like that, Anne. And this gives me a good transition to our next session, where we will focus on how to go from long-term planning to more practical implementation. But before we go there, I'd like to have a short recap on where the industry stands on decarbonization. So, as we learned from previous sessions, the international pressure is building up. Eric mentioned that, and Knut, they mentioned that regulations will become more stringent. So, there is no way out. Stakeholders, we need to take actions today across the entire value chain. And there are many solutions that we can utilize towards reaching our goals. We have carbon neutral fuels. They will play the most significant role, and there is a need for an industry-wide transition towards those fuels. We have biofuels as drop-in fuels. They will also play a very significant role, and there are some challenges when it comes to availability and cost. And then we have energy efficiency and technology. And the industry has a lot of experience around that for decades, and at this time, we see an abundance of innovation and new technological development, which is great because we will have more solutions, but also it creates the need for more robust analysis and verification on the actual savings. And finally, we have, of course, operational measures that can be low-hanging fruit, but and they usually require minimal to no investment, but it's not always within the operator's reach. So, starting from the fuels, the targets cannot be reached without an industry-wide transition to these carbon-neutral fuels. And as we saw already today, it's not an easy task. In our discussion earlier with Ingrid, we discussed how important it is to break the conundrum of fuel and supply, and this is not an easy task. Many stakeholders across the industry have been working around that, but we need to make sure that stakeholders from across the value chain are involved, including fuel producers and fuel suppliers. Currently, we have approximately 7.5% of the current fleet being able to burn alternative fuels, low carbon fuels, which is quite impressive, but we can do better. And we will do better in the future because if we look at the order book, we see that half of it is able to burn carbon neutral fuels. But to expedite and accelerate the fuel adoption, we need to investigate all solutions. And definitely, energy efficiency will play a vital role. And what is the business case behind energy efficiency? Well, it is quite an important one. On the short term, today, energy efficiency is already being used to reduce consumption, therefore costs, emissions, and also help with compliance. This is already important and helpful. But also in the future, it will play a quite essential role. We know the fuels of the future will be more expensive, and in that reality, having energy efficiency will have a much bigger impact on the cost and therefore on the adoption of the fuels. And I think it is very important to understand that energy efficiency and fuels are two pieces of the same puzzle, and one can accelerate and enable the faster adoption of the other. But what is energy efficiency? What are the measures? There are countless measures, there are many solutions, and there is no solution that fits all. So the question is, how can I assess what solution goes to my vessel, to my fleet, to my routes? And I'm quite happy to say that we have looked into this, and in 2 weeks' time, we will publish our new energy efficiency report. In this report, you will be able to find a comprehensive overview of all measures, and more specifically, detailed information on costs, but also suitability for specific ship types. So, if you ask me, what can you do today? Definitely, we start by all means investigate the fuels for new building projects. And when it comes to the existing fleet, but also some new building projects for the new building projects as well, make sure to assess the fleet, identify the potential, identify what are the best solutions for the specific vessel and fleet, and make a very solid implementation plan with KPIs and monitoring, so you are sure that you can follow it up. And last but not least, it is very important to not forget data infrastructure. As Dorina and Line discussed earlier, this becomes more and more important, but also in connection with energy efficiency, a good infrastructure of data, it can provide more solid findings, it can give more knowledge, which will facilitate and enable easier decision-making for the future. So, more interesting insights and advice on energy efficiency may be found in our energy efficiency report to be released in a couple of weeks' time. Make sure that you register today so you get your copy directly. The publication includes more than 40 solutions, energy efficiency and other decarbonization solutions, and we picked 2 of them today to zoom in. Biofuels and WAPS, wind-assisted propulsion systems. And we chose those for a specific reason. Biofuels, because this is the most important solution for compliance, the most popular solution for compliance with FuelEU. We see most of the owners using biofuels as a short-term or mid-term solution. And wind-assisted propulsion systems, because we have seen some good findings. So I'm happy to pass it over to my colleague, Øyvind Sekkesæter. Øyvind, over to you.
Thanks for the introduction. Biofuels are seen by many as a promising path to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from shipping, due to both their availability today and because many biofuel types have a potential drop-in capability on board conventional ships designed for fuel oil. As illustrated in our recent white paper on biofuels, in 2023, the global supply of liquid biofuels, primarily FAME, HVO, and ethanol, was about 111 million tons of oil equivalents, or MTOE. Production of biogases, meanwhile, amounted to around 41 MTOE. Out of the global liquid biofuel supply, we estimate that shipping share was around 0.6% or 0.7 MTOE, with the majority of supply going towards road transportation. From bunker sales data from Singapore and Rotterdam, we have seen a significant growth in sales of bio-blended bunker fuels the last few years. This growth is expected to continue as greenhouse gas regulations incentivizing use of biofuels enter into force. I'm joined here today by Johannes Schurman, Commercial Director of Finco Energies, a major supplier of biofuels to the marine market today. Johannes, I have prepared a few questions I would like to ask you. First, could you please tell us about Finco Energies' operations? What biofuel products are you supplying? Where and how much do you supply? And who are your main customers in general?
Yeah, thank you, Oyvind, for the introduction. So we, Finco Energies, are a physical biofuel supplier based in ARA. So we supply biofuels out of the ARA region. In terms of types of products, we have three types of biofuel products, biodiesel products, I have to say, that we can supply today. HVO in terms of highest quality. FAME, most familiar biofuel out there for many shipping companies, and a more residual-based biofuel that we introduced back in 2018. We have the license to supply biomethanol as well, but we see quite a low demand for that. In terms of volume we supply, we are looking at roughly 100 KT of biofuel, pure biofuel we do today, meaning if we supply, for example, a 30% blend, you need to divide that number by 0.3 to get the total volume.
And how about the marine biofuel market today? Do you get strong demand signals from ship owners, and how has this evolved over the past few years?
Today we see quite some demand for biofuels, and the main reason today is basically the implementation of FuelEU Maritime, which started this year. We see many different smaller and bigger shipping companies that want to comply with FuelEU and that see biofuel as one of the potential options to comply. Looking back at the past, in 2023, CII was implemented. We expected quite a lot from CII because if you make a model basis, what companies need to consume to comply with the C rating of CII, they need to consume actually quite a lot of biofuel. However, because there's no penalty of CII, we didn't see much demand so far from this legislation. Looking further back, beyond 2023, the consumption of biofuel was mainly driven by the voluntary market, meaning shipping companies that wanted to consume biofuels for their own sustainability targets, or cargo owners pushing for the use of biofuels so that they can claim green transport for their cargo.
What are the key risks that you see as a biofuel supplier on expanding your marine bunker operations today?
The main risk is that if demand falls away, and demand falls away, that can lead that we don't get our money back on the investments we make. So if we would invest in our logistical setup, in new terminals, barges for other products like methanol, and demand falls away, we lose those investments, of course. So what is important for us is that legislation remains consistent. If we have consistent legislation, then we know for X years going forward that demand will be there, that shipping companies will come to ARA to bunker biofuel. What we have seen in the recent years is that legislation, both on national level and international level, was not always consistent, and therefore demand was fluctuating, and that is killing for fuel suppliers if they want to invest in new technologies.
Getting to our last question now, Johannes. What do you see as the most important drivers for biofuel demand? And how do you see the biofuel market developing over the next 5 years? Do you think that use of book and claim systems, allowing green transport services to be offered based on certificates, do you consider that that these might help to boost demand for biofuels?
Yeah, so on the legislative side, not many will change, I expect, in the coming 5 years. So we today have ETS and FuelEU coming from the European Commission. Unfortunately, the target of FuelEU remains 2% until 2029. ETS cost will go up a bit for shipping companies, meaning that the spread between bio and fossil is getting slightly smaller, but it's not enough to cover the gap. So from the legislative side from Europe, I don't think there will be much more push. Then the question is what happens with the IMO? Will CII bring more push? Will there be another, like a global fuel standard pushing for sustainable fuels? Will there be a global carbon levy implemented in the coming 5 years? All those questions need to be answered to understand whether there will be a legislative push. Then you have the voluntary market, so the market pushed by the shipping companies themselves, by banks, by cargo owners. And then the big question is, what are the rules of those voluntary markets? May you use the fuels, the biofuels that you needed for the mandatory market, may you use them as well for the voluntary market? That concept is called additionality. If you know a lot about book and claim systems, most of them say that if you want to sell emission reductions in the voluntary market, they need to be additional on things that would happen anyway. If the shipping industry will follow this additionality requirement, then the voluntary market can be a massive driver for the increase in sustainable fuels in shipping. But the rules are not yet accepted by all shipping companies. They're not harmonized among all the shipping companies using green fuels.
Thank you very much for joining us here today, Johannes. Handing back to the studio now.
Thank you both. Extremely insightful. So now, let's learn more about WAPS, wind-assisted propulsion systems. It's definitely not a new idea. We have been harnessing wind for millennia. We have WAPS systems for decades, but the business case today is better than ever before. So now I hand it over to our top industry expert with more than 8 years of experience, Hasso Hofmeister.
Thanks for your kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the shipping industry faces increasingly strict greenhouse gas emission regulations on the path to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And we sense that wind-assisted propulsion technology is stepping into a focus. But why this new interest? Well, probably because wind is a renewable and completely free source of energy. For ship owners and operators, wind-assisted propulsion offers an attractive way to comply with regulations that not only impose cost on emissions, but also require the use of pricier, low greenhouse gas intensity fuels. This way, the obtained fuel savings support to reach a compliance with key initiatives like the EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime regulations, and most probably also the forthcoming updates from the IMO. Today here with us is Chris Hughes, decarbonization specialist at Cargill Ocean Transportation. He brings with him a vast experience as one of the first movers in the industry pursuing, installing and operating wind-assisted propulsion. Good day, Chris. It's nice to have you here with us.
Hi, Hasso. Look, thanks for the invitation. Always happy to talk about wind propulsion. I think you and I could probably talk about it for hours. I'm going to try not to geek out too much here.
Yeah, Chris. According to my records, Your original plans to fit an MR tanker with sails date back to the summer of 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic. At that time, only a handful of ships had installed wind-assisted propulsion, making Cargill really one of the early pioneers. I'm wondering what gave you the confidence to pursue this decision back then, and what was your game plan at that time?
Yeah, good question. I think it was before I joined Cargill, so I can't take the credit, but I can kind of speak about it. I don't think it was kind of so much a confidence, because I think when Cargill kind of started down this journey and got this interest in wind, we didn't really have a solution in mind. I think it was more driven by a desire to innovate, you know, a want to kind of show what's possible within the shipping industry and really accelerate the decarbonisation. And coupled with that, kind of a willingness to actually kind of step out of the comfort zone, take some risk to kind of try and make things happen. You know, we thought someone had to step up, and Cargill could potentially be one of the people to do that. I think, you know, why wind is kind of, it started earlier. I think it was around about 2017 with some work that Cargill did with DNV at the stage, looking at kind of all the different ESD options that are out there and decarbonised options that were on the table. And I think wind stood out as one of the only kind of options that could offer, you know, more than 10% savings. So I think that was kind of one of the interesting things, and also it kind of showed that we thought it could be competitive from a cost perspective as well.
Okay. Wind-assisted propulsion requires a significant upfront investment, doesn't it? With high capex, but notably low opex, as the fuel is virtually free. Today, we see leading manufacturers scaling up their production, and that has the potential to reduce the capex in the long run and make the technology more commercially attractive, perhaps. So what do you think would be a tipping point for the industry in terms of achieving a favorable return on investment?
Yeah, I think capex is always important, but I think at least the approach we take for wind propulsion and a lot of other kind of decarb technologies as well is we're more focused on kind of the ROI, the payback period, or dollars per ton of CO2 abated. You know, we use these kind of measures that are more of a balance, a ratio between your capex and your opex savings. I think the capex of building the sails is and should come down with time, like you said, as kind of scale effects kick in. But I think at least from our perspective today, I think we see there's more challenges around on the capex side around the installation costs. So particularly around retrofits, it's still a big component of that cost. So one of the things we're looking at is how we can kind of get that down. Less of a problem with new builds, but still, you know, where we want to retrofit vessels as well as new builds. And then on the OPEX side, I think that the biggest question mark and challenge we're facing at the moment is the uncertainty about what are those savings. How much are we going to save if we put this technology and operate it on this ship in this way? And then the other part as well, like any new technology, is you know, what we talk about as RAMs, you know, the reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety. And so I think, you know, these technologies are still pretty new. We've still got a fair bit to learn there, and how much that affects the OPEX. So I think where we are today is we see the payback periods, at least for us on a tramping bulk carrier, are kind of too long. So we haven't reached that tipping point yet. We think that tipping point is going to be driven by regulations. And that's essentially what we're doing with the experimentation we're doing now, is getting ready to be able to scale once those tipping points come into place.
So it sounds as if, even though we have at hand highly advanced modeling approaches, still an amount of variability and uncertainty is involved, right? But yeah. So let me come to my next question. I think we can say that we are kind of witnessing a renaissance of sailing and shipping. but I'm still hesitant to call the ships equipped with sail technology sailing ships. What is your own outlook of how dominant sail systems will or could ever get on cargo ships?
Yeah, that's a good point. I like Renaissance. I get tripped up a lot because I talk to people about this great new technology we're working on, which is wind propulsion. People go, hang on, this is not new. So I think a Renaissance, I might borrow that. Yeah, in terms of whether they're sailing ships or not, I think that's a really fair point as well. I think there's some really cool projects and that other people are doing in the industry around what we call kind of primary wind propulsion, which are really kind of sailing vessels, and I think that's great. Where we are focused on at the moment is what we kind of talk about more as wind assist propulsion. And we think, again, within kind of our sector, that's how we can have the most impact. That's how we can scale up on more ships and basically reduce the most CO2 in the kind of the medium term and have the most, the most impact. So what we're looking for is this kind of sweet spot between bigger savings and that ROI, that payback period that I was talking about before. What we're finding through kind of the work we've done and the experimentation we've done so far is that today it's doable to put wind propulsion on a bulk carrier with kind of more modest savings. We've done that. The NBA Marguerite project that we've done there is a really good example. That's really doable today. But I think what we're finding is if you want to get those bigger savings, 15, 20, 25% more savings, which is kind of where we're trying to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone and work out how to do that. That's definitely harder. And there's a few reasons we're finding, we're kind of learning on that. I think one of them is kind of on the ship design side, particularly with the retrofits, you kind of hit limits. On the Pyxis Ocean, they're big, powerful sails. We're kind of running the engine at kind of the minimum load a lot of the time. We're getting pretty big leeway angles and rudder angles, which gives you drag. So you get these kind of losses of efficiencies as you go too big. I think the other area where we got challenges with going bigger is around the port interface. And this is something that I think is specific to bulk carriers. Getting the sails out of the way to do loading and unloading operations is critical. It's difficult to do, and it's really important you can do that. So again, this is probably one of the biggest challenges we're kind of working on at the moment. How do we get bigger, more powerful, more sails, bigger savings, but at the same time kind of fit within the port infrastructure that's there? Because we're happy to kind of disrupt ourselves, I think, to try and make this happen. But we don't want to kind of just expect the whole supply chains that we serve to have to change to kind of fit our wind ships.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit long.
So, no, really interesting perspectives that you're sharing, Chris. But while you mentioned Pyxis Ocean, I saved this one for last, and I'm really certain that our audience has been perhaps waiting for this question. But with your ships, you've gone through some trials. Can you share some numbers, please? So how much does wind-assisted propulsion actually save in terms of fuel or CO2 as peak or in average in your cases?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look, I thought we'd probably kind of get to this. Everyone always wants to know the numbers. Look, so I'll start with kind of the cool parts and the interesting parts. I think, we think these things work. We've had savings. The first voyage for the Pyxis Ocean and the first voyage for the TR Lady as well with the rotors. Both of those, straight out of the shipyard, we were getting really great savings, 20, 30% plus. I think maximum kind of 32% on the Pyxis Ocean because we got lucky. We got some really good conditions on those. So, that's awesome. But I think the approach we're taking is the business case for this is based on the average savings you get. And so we're not so worried about whether it's 2% or 20% we're saving on these voyages where we're doing the experimentation. What we really want to do is kind of validate the models that we're using in our simulations. And then once we trust those simulations, we can use them to make better decisions, to trust our business models. So I think on the Pyxis, the way we worked is we did a lot of on and off testing in those kind of initial experimentation phases. We did those with the supported DNV, and I think what we learned from that is that we could trust the models that BAR had the simulations and the savings that come out of the simulations from BAR, and I think that's pretty impressive. You know, that they were right pretty much outside of the box. I think the other thing we learned is that it's difficult to do accurately, but if you do enough of these tests, you can trust the models. And the way that worked is we run those if we run those models for the Pyxis Ocean on a typical Kamsarmax routes over a long period, you know, what that says is we should be saving around about 3 tons a day for that vessel on those routes. But I think one of the reasons why I've kind of given you a bit of a long-winded answer there and are reluctant to give kind of figures is because, you know, there's really 2 parts to the savings you get out of these technologies. One is what the technology does as itself, but also like what you do with that ship. So just because it's 3 tons on the Pyxis doesn't mean that someone else operating a ship on different routes in a different way can't be more or be different. Yeah.
And it's all about statistics also, isn't it? So I understand that your point is also verifying the theory of predictions that you were given in early project stage seems at least as important as the actual saving numbers themselves at this stage.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Quick, very last question to you. What would be your key message to our audience?
Okay. I'd say, look, I think we've learned a huge amount with the 3 vessels that we have on the water so far, but we haven't finished learning yet. We don't have all the answers. We're still doing more experimentation. I think we still, having gone through that process, we still believe in our original thesis that wind has and can play an important role in the decarbonisation of shipping. It can be a competitive way of complying with those regulations and reducing the cost of decarbonisation. I think I've got to give a big shout out to everyone that we've worked with, all our partners through these projects. You know, we definitely haven't done these alone. And look, on the Pyxis Ocean, we work very closely with MC Shipping, the owners of the vessel, and I think that's a great example of what I call a true partnership kind of collaboration that you need to kind of make these things work. You know, we're on the same page. It's a real collaborative risk sharing agreement there. So I think we haven't finished experimenting yet. I reckon we've got at least another round of experimentation in us for wind before we scale up. We always need like-minded partners. So, you know, for the ship owners out there, if you're on the same page as us, you're willing to be bold, courageous, take some risks and innovate, let's talk.
Yeah. Chris, I really have to express a huge thank you for being with us today. The experience you shared was really extremely interesting and hopefully also inspiring for the audience. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Hasse. It's good to talk.
With that, back to the studio.
Thank you so much to Hasse and Chris. Yes, indeed, that was very inspiring and was great to see the passion for the topic and for the technology. And if you want to dive deeper and learn more about WAPS, about wind-assisted propulsion systems, I do recommend that you dive into our latest white paper. It's fresh off the press. It's available as of this week, available for download on our website, or if you scan the QR code popping up every now and then throughout the event today, I highly recommend that. By the way, we also have a white paper on biofuels, coming back to that topic as well. So that's out for, I believe, 2 weeks by now. So again, it's really recommended if you want to understand more about the technology and the potential. Download your personal copy today, and you can already sign up for our new upcoming energy efficiency report. And in a few weeks' time, that will go straight into your mailboxes if you do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on because we've got more on the agenda. So to echo what Jason said earlier today, it's really a massive decarbonization puzzle that we're looking at. And in order to put all the pieces together, we really need to explore all the options at hand, but that is easier said than done. So maybe all the more it's important to learn what some of the industry leading voices are doing to tackle that challenge, how they address the challenge at hand, and also how they balance the long-term ambitions with the more short-term needs. And for that now we are going to listen into an interesting conversation where we're going to feature both the shipbuilding and the ship owning perspective. And I'm extremely happy that this important discussion will be hosted by Tradewind's Julian Bray. He is, of course, the editor-in-chief and a well-known trusted voice to the industry in his own right. Thank you for taking on this challenge, Julian, and over to you, please.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next section of this of DNV's annual Maritime Energy Transition Conference. My name's Julian Bray, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Tradewinds, the global shipping news source. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by some influential and authoritative figures in the shipping world who'll share their experiences and opinions on some of the practical issues facing ship owners, operators, and shipyards as we grapple with the challenge of cutting carbon emissions to limit the impact of climate change. May I welcome Ioana Procopiou, the CEO of Sea Traders, which is part of Greece's Dynacom Group, one of the world's largest independent ship-owning groups, and Mr. Li Yangqing, Secretary General of the China Association of the National Shipbuilding Industry, otherwise known as CANSI. No one can not be aware of the impact of climate change in the world around us today, from small changes in the local environment to catastrophic events, climate events in many parts of the world. And just in the last couple of weeks, it's been recorded that the world's average temperature last year was now 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. That's significant, as it's the threshold which climate scientists believe is the tipping point for a spiral of true climate calamities. It's now undisputed that driving this change is man-made greenhouse gas emissions. And last year, total greenhouse gas emissions, in fact, hit a new record, recent statistics revealed. And shipping emissions itself were up over 4% to over 1 billion tons on a well-to-wake business, according to reputable estimates. This wake-up call has just come as shipping arguably is finally starting to get to grips with the issue. Last year, some 50% of all new ship owners' orders had alternative fuel capability, while carbon pricing for shipping services is now law in Europe. Low carbon fuel technology is being rolled out, energy-saving technologies are commonplace, and nations are set to sign a landmark agreement at IMO to price carbon on a global basis. But the challenges for individual ship owners remain. In this period of evolving technologies, rules and fuel supply, how to create a credible and viable business plan, how to preempt future risk but avoid stranded assets, how to make investments at the right time in the right technology, energy-saving retrofits of existing craft or new buildings. So let's dive straight into that question. Could I ask, turn first to Ioana Procopiou of Sea Traders. Ioana, how are you grappling with the challenge of creating a commercially viable strategy that's balancing short-term compliance requirements with long-term competitiveness and environmental ambitions?
Hello, Julian. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Listen, in my view, customer demand and customer, obviously, we need to comply with the changing environment, and that is being more environmentally friendly. And our obligation to the environment and to the future generations that are to come. So we have to definitely balance that with with having seamless operation when it comes to trading, because what we don't want to do is disrupt the trading patterns and the supply chain. And this is going to be a very annoying topic when it happens, and we say, okay, in order to comply with the new environmental regulations, okay, you're going to get your goods twice a week instead on a daily basis. So I think we need seamless operation, and we need to be more environmentally friendly when it comes to consumption of our ships.
How do we comply with that? I think by contracting the most environmentally friendly ships. Ships built today are by design 25 to 30% more efficient than the ships built in the previous 15 years ago. So this is what we can do today using the technology that we have in hand, and obviously keeping our eyes in the future and how we can utilize and how we can be part of the new projects and the new alternative fuels that are going to be coming into the supply chain. But one thing we need to bear in mind, that when we're talking about alternative fuels, we have to have seen for those fuels that they do have a proven environmental benefit with a long-term horizon, that they are sustainably sourced, that they are readily available around the globe. Because as you know, we are bulk players, we're trunk players, which means we go everywhere in the globe where our customers need us to go. And unless we have the ability to bunker those alternative fuels, we won't be able to complete our voyage. And one thing we need to bear in mind is that these fuels need to be safe to handle and use, as some of the alternatives that we're discussing today are toxic and very hard to handle. And then it comes the element of pricing. So who is going to pay for the price cap? There's huge difference between the prices and the energy content of the fuel that we're using today compared to the fuel of the future. And the final thing is that they have to have a lower greenhouse gas for the emissions for the whole range of the emissions, not just carbon dioxide.
Jana, thank you very much for making those points, particularly around the supply and the cost issue, which are in many ways yet to be resolved. Let's turn to Li Yangqing, the Secretary General of the China Association of the National Shipbuilding Industry, representing China's shipyards. I'm sure everyone is aware that Chinese yards last year delivered over 50% of the ships that were built, and took over 70% of new orders, of which around 50% had capability for alternative fueled engines. Mr. Li, how are the shipyards able to support this transition on behalf of the ship owners and ship operators are attempting to drive?
Okay, so you know that the China shipbuilding industry has achieved a very great achievement, and now we have the 2/3 of the market share. So we can say that China now is in the leading place for the global shipbuilding industry. So but the challenge is the same. For the green transition, there's still a lot of problems for shipyards. I believe, in fact, during the implementation of short-term emission reduction measures, shipyards are mostly passive. For most of the time, the innovation has been driven by regulation, I believe. However, the situation is different now. The IMO strategy has been updated. The targets are very clear, so there's more consensus, especially now China is now playing a big role in the global maritime. So that's to say the global maritime industry also has a high expectations for Chinese shipyards in this case. What I know is that most of Chinese shipyards have formulated or published the green development strategies or development plan, among which the main focus is on the building of green shipyards. From the Chinese government to industry associations, for example, RCANSI, we encourage and certify the green shipyards. So this year, RCANSI will further promote new actions in the industry's green and low carbon development, especially while paying close attention to finding good international cooperative partners to establish a low carbon development ecosystem. It's very important. So only Chinese shipyards can play the great role to finish this green transition totally. So that's why we need more partners together to form the green transition ecosystem. So that's a key point. Thank you.
Thank you. Jano Prokopiou, going back to the question of managing the situation today and the cost of investment. Clearly, new buildings are priced at a premium today, not only for alternative fuel vessels but also for general vessels. The price is as high as it was back at the peak of the market in 2007. So a lot of attention has been put on energy-saving technologies. Saving fuel saves emissions. What is your approach to that question and the allocation of funds to retrofit existing ships to reduce their emissions?
I think in this situation, it's the environment's benefits are on the same page as the savings of the biggest expense for ship owners and charters, which is the cost of fuel. So there is alignment of needs and interest in this topic. I think when it comes to retrofits, one thing to think about is, what is the life of the remaining useful life of the ship that you're trying to retrofit? How expensive is the retrofit or the energy-saving device that you're planning on installing? For example, now we're changing in all our ships, no matter the age, when they go to dry dock, we use silicone paints, and we've seen a big reduction in emissions and much better sailing through the water when it comes to these anti-fouling, silicone-based anti-fouling paints. We put ducts in some cases where the, in all of these cases, you need to do an analysis to see what's going to be the benefit. Because in order it costs to do these retrofits, and you need to have some sort of proven payback time for those as well.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lee. Turning over to the question of technology of to burn low carbon, no carbon fuels. What is the role of innovation and collaboration across the shipbuilding space like from China's perspective? You are leaders in many technologies, but how important is building collaboration between partners in the shipbuilding chain?
So I believe the 2 points. The first is about the application of the energy-saving technologies. I believe that most Chinese shipyards will consider the different compositions about the air lubrication systems or air assist systems or the high efficiency propellers, and also the other technical measures together to provide the holistic solution to support the ship owners' needs. The second point is about the optimization of the design of the cabin, especially for the alternative fuels. That's very full of the challenge for the ship designers and also for the shipyards. We will consider these 2 ways to combine or comprehensively using the different solutions to support. So nowadays, I believe the first point is the main focus to have the more applications of the energy-saving technologies. That's it.
In many other industries, there are end date clauses being put on fossil fuel technologies. You look at the vehicle market, the consumer vehicle market in Europe, and even parts of the freight market. Mr. Lee, do you think that Chinese shipyards would be willing participants in putting an end date on fossil fuel engined ships in the next 10 or 15 years, similar to that which is being rolled out in the vehicle market as electric vehicles are developed?
Okay, so that's a good question. In China, we have many discussions and sometimes very, I believe that the debate, different scientists, engineers from shipyards, from the power solutions, energy solutions companies, they will debate. For example, if you come from the internal combustion engine factories or companies will always defend your position, your technical position. But if you come from the battery producers or from the the dual fuel cells producers, you'll say that in the future, well, maybe that's all the electrical driving the vessels. So just now you mentioned perhaps in the future we will have another scenario that we have the vessels powered by battery or electrification. So I think that's perhaps be the very promising future. So for Kansi, we support these two ways because we cannot throw away our shot. We need to seize the opportunities because in China we have accumulated some experience in the automobile, the vessel, the cars. So I think that's true now. But in the near term, I don't think that this will become the reality in the ocean-going ships. But for the coast shipping or inland navigation, I think that'd be true. Yeah.
Liana, could I put to you the question of advice to smaller ship owners, particularly perhaps in your home country, Greece, of course. Over the last year, statistically, it's become apparent that bigger shipyards have been investing in newer ships at a faster rate than smaller owners and at a faster rate than historically. What other particular challenges would you see for smaller ship owners in dealing with the role of managing the energy transition and the rising regulatory demands for lower emission ships in the face of these very high new building prices? Oh, you're on mute, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Good question, but I will jump a little bit back to the previous question about if we can have an end date for the conventional fossil fuels. I think that it would be risky to try and abandon conventional fuels prematurely. And even though the goal is to slowly phase out fossil fuels, the path to the future is complex and is a little bit uncertain, as there's no proven technology right now that is safe, available, and economically makes sense in order to replace fossil fuels. And I think that there has been a lot of improvement in new, highly efficient engines that run on conventional fuels. And this is what we've been doing as a company, as a group. All of our new buildings are with much more efficient engines, but they are of conventional fuels. Going back to your second question, which has to do with the regulatory burden that is being placed upon owners, I think it's going to be harder for everyone to comply because there's just going to be a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of jobs created in order to keep tally with what the EU ETS requires from you, what the fuel EU is requiring from you, and what the global fuel standard that's going to come into force in the next few years is going to require from you. Also, transportation to and from Europe is going to be very expensive. And if you make something expensive, the thought process was that we're making conventional fuels expensive in order to make alternative fuels more attractive. The problem is that the alternative fuels are not available in the scale that we would have hoped for them to be, and they're not as efficient in order to be burned. You need to have another vessel with a different engine, and that comes back to the issue of availability, worldwide availability of those alternative fuels, plus the cost, etc. So I think that with the with the EU ETS, what we're going to see is that countries are going to be benefiting a lot of money, that some of it will be invested back into the shipping industry for research or for pilot programs or for decarbonizing the existing ships. But the majority of it is going to go back to the countries, and we're not going to see, if you pollute and you pay, you don't take the pollution away. So unless there are tangible outcomes of this payment system, I think it's just going to be an economic burden for everyone, and it's going to make transportation to Europe and trading with Europe quite expensive. Now, who's going to fit the bill at the end? Is it still going to be the end user? But the ship owner is not going to subsidize the trade, and that I think is it's a fact.
Could I just follow up on that question of the cost and supply of fuel, which is the old cliche of the chicken and the egg, is often cited in this. What can come first, the demand or the supply? In a report last year, the Getting to Zero Coalition looked at the facts. And while technologies are there, and even quite a few of the ships are coming, the supply is behind the trajectory for the 5% ambition, the 5% target, and certainly the 10% ambition of low carbon fuel by 2030. Europe, as you said a little earlier, very much involved in the global tramp trades. Now, some of the deals that have been done to incentivize production of fuel have been done in effectively line trades, even bulk line trades, where there are end-to-end services. Can you envisage that for genuine tramp trading that a lot of your ships are involved with, that low zero emission fuels will be available at scale inside the next decade, or is it likely to be further off than that?
That's a good question, Julian. It's $1 million question. But having said that, unless you have a dual fuel ship that can burn up both the alternative fuel and the conventional fuel, if you build a pure alternative fuel burning ship, you're stuck, because you have to supply the ship with this alternative fuel. Yep. So I am not sure that we will be able to find, I mean, you could potentially be able to find this sort of, as you said, for the liner trades that have a specific route, and then you can secure the quantities you need. The price as well is going to be an issue, because I don't know what, depending, as you know, a lot of ships are being built with not a lot of projects to supply those ships. So the price is always going to be an issue, and the availability. Now, for a pure Trump operator, I think it's going to be almost impossible. And just to give you a magnitude of scale for the cost that we're talking about, let's say you wanted a very large container carrier would need 36 wind turbines that cost about 1.1 billion and have an OPEX of 100K a day in order to produce enough quantity of green methanol, which is 400 tons a day, that this ship needs to be operated if you want it to be with green methanol. So the numbers we're talking are insane. So
indeed,
I don't know. I think the numbers
challenging at best. I think it's what I say. Mr. Lee, we're coming towards the end here, but just one final question from your perspective in China. Could I ask, how does the low carbon, no carbon shipping, and particularly shipbuilding, the building of ships that emit low levels of emissions, how does that fit with China's overall decarbonization strategy?
Okay, that China has our own strategy about the peak to peak in 2030 and the carbon neutral in 2060. So it's a long time strategy. So it's an overarching guide for all our sectors. So for our shipbuilders, it's also aim to this target, to step by step to take the measures to realize the different stages goal or targets, and based on our efforts, especially our technical solutions. So just now I mentioned, now we have the green shipyards and the green enterprises of green companies. So government, local government, central government, and also our associations will facilitate our policies, our opinions to all our members let them to have their strategy, have their development plan, and also take measures to cover all the emissions, including the VOC and including the, the electrification, something like that. So step by step, it's a strategy for our shipbuilding industry. So I believe that we'll have the great achievement maybe 5 years later. Right.
Thank you. I asked that question just to set up really a final question, which I think it would be unfair not to refer to. In recent days, we've had the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, for a second time, and he has signed an executive order withdrawing from the Paris Agreement on climate change. Effectively, the US is withdrawing its commitment to net zero in 2050. I know this is very early and this isn't a political discussion, but what is your feel for the impact on the debate and activity in the shipping world of the new US administration's role in this debate, if you feel comfortable in discussing that? Jana, could I ask you first?
Listen, it was very recent that the new U.S. president was inaugurated. But what I can say, I mean, remains to be seen. He's always been pro-drilling, pro-fossil fuels, doesn't like to follow what the rest of the world is saying when it comes to the environmental aspects of it. But one thing we can say from not being in the U.S. is that for any change to be successful, we need stability. And if with every coming and going administration, we have a different stance of, the US is a superpower, so is China, and unless there's some sort of stability in their position, it's going to be very hard to draw some sort of, this is where we're going, this is how it's going to be done, etc. Because it's easy to, not to ridicule, but when you have a plan, the countries need to adhere to it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So that's my take. But as I said, it's very early for us to say what is the long-term effects of this will be of this presidency.
Indeed. So it's more the uncertainty than the fact at this stage. Mr. Lee, could I ask you from your perspective in Beijing?
To deal with the climate change issue is, we have already talked and take actions for many years. So it's a very high priority of the international or global governance issue. And for the shipping industry or maritime industry, now we are on the track to decarbonization. So I think that's most players here will still stick to this strategy, but maybe some different discussion or ideas usually exist. Just that's to say the pathway. So I think that's it's good for to defend our planet. So I think it's a right way now.
Do you believe China can be a global leader on climate?
Oh, I'm not sure, but China is always very strive to realize our own target for the 60. So I think that it's a commitment to the international community. I think all the sectors in China will follow our strategic targets of our nation. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And to all our speakers this morning, many thanks for your contribution. I hope it's been enjoyable for the delegates watching out there. And with that, I'd like to hand back to the DNV studio. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A big thank you also from our side to Ioana Procopio, Mr. Lee, and of course to Julian for facilitating this very interesting discussion. Jason, what are you taking away from this?
Well, I think it was quite interesting. I like the fact that we saw both ship owning and shipbuilding perspective. If I had to take one key learning, it's we have been doing a lot when it comes to owners and shipbuilders, and we will do more, but this is one part of the whole story. We need to ensure that the other stakeholders start to take more and more action, fuel producers, fuel suppliers, and the rest of the supply chain and the value chain.
Right, so there's still work to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening patiently, and I hope you found it all interesting and insightful up until now. This concludes the main part of our agenda today, but there is more to come, so please do stay tuned. We have prepared a number of breakout sessions, and there you will get insights into some of the DNV services and solutions that we have on offer to enable you and help you to drive the energy transition for your individual companies and fleets. And these are the topics that you will get to choose from. So one of the topics is the Alternative Fuels Insights Portal, also known as AFI. So that's very interesting for all of you who would like to learn from the largest database that we have in the industry, providing trends and insights into the uptake of alternative fuels, both from the supply and the demand side. So the AFI session is certainly really interesting. And then coming back to biofuel insetting, which we've discussed earlier today, if you want to learn more and also if you want to ask questions and engage, by all means, join the biofuels working group. And then coming back to emissions management and the topic that Lena and Dorina talked about, we do have a session on Emissions Connect, hopefully already today, or maybe your future solution to manage the financial and commercial impact from EU ETS. So Emissions Connect, worth checking out. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about the fuel of the future and the difficulty of choosing the right fuel. It's going to get ever more important in the long run. So if you have trouble choosing your individual fuel strategy, I recommend our breakout session on our Fuel Selector tool. Ultimately, it's a decision support service that will hopefully help you find your optimal alternative fuel strategy. And last and certainly not least, because we do know it's a hotly debated topic, we do have a breakout group on nuclear propulsion. Obviously, that is a carbon neutral solution, but also it does come with quite a few challenges and barriers. So if you're keen to discuss nuclear propulsion, we have a breakout session on that topic as well. Jason, if you had to pick, where would you go?
Oh, well, that's a hard choice. I mean, I don't know, but I will pick one and see the rest in the recordings.
That's all right. I'll give you a few more seconds to decide, and then you can jump over to your computer and join one of the sessions. What do you need to do? Well, bear with me for 30 seconds, and then you go to the menu bar on the left-hand side of the streaming window. You just go to Sessions, and then you just click another button, and then you're right in the breakout group. Just jump in, sit in, listen in, and relax, or actively engage by asking your questions to our DNV experts. This is it from the two of us here on the main stage. It's been a great pleasure to take you through today's program. We hope you found it interesting and relevant. And as ever, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of our DNV experts around the globe. We're all very eager and ready and happy to assist and hopefully help you and your companies define your decarbonization strategies and decide on the way forward. So by all means, reach out. After all, at DNV, it's our vision to be a trusted voice to tackle global transformations. But we're all in this together, so we really need to work together to drive change and truly make an impact. This is it from our side. A big thank you. You've been a fantastic virtual audience, and we do hope to see you again very, very soon at another DNV event. Enjoy the breakout sessions. Take care, and goodbye from Hamburg.